Сейчас предоставляю слово представителю Словении.
Thank you, President. First, I want to thank ASG-INCHA for his briefing. In these challenging times with conflicts persisting across many regions of the world, we are repeatedly reminded of the paramount importance of respecting the UN Charter and international law. The proliferation of conflicts and growing insecurity are inevitably linked to violations of our shared commitments to international peace and security. While we are concerned in this regard about the situation of the coasts of Venezuela, we're equally troubled about the deteriorating humanitarian and human rights situation in the country, compounded by political instability and violence. Mr. President, as maritime security in the Caribbean has significant implications for regional stability, the events described by ASG-INCHA could potentially set a dangerous precedent and place us on a volatile path. At this stage, it is therefore of utmost importance to refrain from any actions that might further aggravate the situation. Working together through international law enforcement and judicial cooperation is the most effective and powerful tool against organized crime. It is our responsibility as members of the Council to ensure that we do not stray from the UN Charter and international law, and to insist that obligations therein be respected at all times. Mr. President, we recognize Latin America and the Caribbean's commitment to peace, security, and stability. We welcome the statements and actions of countries and group of countries in the region aimed at upholding this commitment. Slovenia will stand with them as they work to maintain a zone of peace in the region. I thank you.
Я благодарю представителя Словении за ее выступление. Сейчас предоставляю слово представителю Сьерра-Леоне.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I also thank ASG Miroslav for his helpful briefing. And Sierra Leone takes note of the communication from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, dated 9th October 2025. As we approach the 80th anniversary of the signing of the UN Charter, this meeting must remind us of the enduring relevance of the Charter's principles and the need to ensure that our collective security framework continues to serve as the foundation of peace and stability. When the Charter was signed in San Francisco 80 years ago, it was not with the illusion that conflict or threats to international peace and security would disappear from the affairs of humankind. It was founded instead on the conviction that the occurrence of threats and devastating conflict could only be prevented by a shared commitment to a system of rules. The Charter's promise to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war was premised on the acceptance by all states, large and small, of the fundamental principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, political independence, non-intervention, the non-use of force, and the peaceful settlement of dispute. The drafters of the Charter, conscious of the failures of the League of Nations, deliberately replaced the doctrine of might is right with a new international order governed by law. They understood that durable peace required collective responsibility and restraint. It was for this reason that the United Nations established a system of collective security, with the Security Council entrusted as the principal organ for maintaining international peace and security. This structure was meant to ensure that force would never again be the first recourse to conflict. Mr. President, the authority of this Council carries with it an obligation to ensure clarity and preserve consistency in the application of the Charter's principles. The rules that bind the international community must apply equally to all member states. The legitimacy of the multilateral system depends on this equality before the law. When the Council acts, it speaks on behalf of all member states. When it fails to uphold the rules that sustain peace, it risks weakening the very system designed to protect us all. Sierra Leone takes note of the concerns raised in Venezuela's letter regarding development in the Caribbean region and the appeal to the Security Council to uphold the Charter's purposes and principles. While it may be too early to comment on the specifics of the matters reported, Sierra Leone reiterates that all member states have an obligation to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of others, to refrain from the threat or use of force, and to resolve dispute by peaceful means. These obligations are not conditional. They are the bedrock of international peace and security. In our usual introspection, we recall that our country's own history has demonstrated that peace, once lost, can only be restored through adherence to law, dialogue, and cooperation. As such, Sierra Leone reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the principles of the Charter and to the broader framework of international law that supports it. This includes the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, which codifies many of the rules of customary international law applicable to non-state parties and to provide a comprehensive legal regime governing maritime activities. In this regard, we also take note of the Treaty of Teloloco, which established Latin America and the Caribbean as a nuclear weapon-free zone. Sierra Leone accordingly underscores that the threat or the use of force in contravention of the Charter and international law is unlawful and undermines the cohesion of the international rules-based system. The Charter allows the use of force only in two circumstances: when authorized by this Council under Chapter 7, or when the state acts in self-defense in response to an armed attack as recognized in Article 51. Outside these parameters, unilateral use of force, whether justified by claims of preemptive defense, counterterrorism, or combating transnational crime, lack legal foundation. Such actions erode confidence in the collective security scheme and risk destabilizing entire regions. Resolutely, for the referenced transnational criminal activities, the appropriate means of redress must remain within the confines of the law. States should resort to establish mechanisms for international cooperation, including mutual legal assistance treaties, extradition arrangements, and information sharing through competent international bodies, such as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and Interpol. These mechanisms provide lawful avenues for combating transnational threats while upholding the principles of the Charter. Further, all member states, without distinction, bear responsibility to ensure that their actions, whether political, economic, or military, conform to international law and contribute to the maintenance of international peace and security. Selective application of norms corrodes trust in multilateralism and diminishes the Council's capacity to act collectively. Sierra Leone therefore urges restraint, renewed dialogue, and the faithful application of international legal principles by all parties concerned. The mechanisms for peaceful settlement, negotiation, mediation, arbitration, and judicial recourse exist precisely to avert confrontation. The Security Council, for its part, must remain a guardian of these principles, ensuring that its decisions reinforce rather than erode the architecture of collective security envisaged in San Francisco 8 decades ago. Let us therefore resolve, as the founders of the United Nations did 80 years ago, that the maintenance of international peace is not the prerogative of individual member states, but the responsibility of all. For it is through adherence to law, respect for sovereignty, and the peaceful settlement of dispute that the promise of the Charter to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war can truly be fulfilled. I thank you.
Я благодарю представителя Сьерра-Леоне за его выступление. Сейчас предоставляю слово представителю Гайаны.
Mr. President,